I knew a girl named Taylor Camp, and she was in my sophomore health class, and she was pretty well liked, and she was just happy and popular, but one day she didn't come to school, and we all kind of thought, okay, she's sick, she'll be back. But Taylor never came back to school because Taylor Camp died that night, and she died because she had meningitis. And her parents had thought, okay, she's got a headache, they let her go to bed, and she never woke up. And the thing is that really stuck with me. We have vaccines now for that. It was developed in 2014, and since that was developed, we've gone down 80% on the rate of meningitis among teens. And had that vaccine been available to Taylor when she was in middle school, she'd probably be alive today. And that definitely was what I was thinking of when my son went into middle school this year, and I definitely had him vaccinated. Despite all of these benefits and proven efficacy of vaccinations, many parents today are afraid of vaccines, not only meningitis, but all vaccines. And this has led to many groups of so-called anti-vaxxers who, in many cases, have developed almost a cult-like phobia of vaccines. Because of all of the above, the U.S. has seen a resurgence in recent years of previously eradicated or almost eradicated diseases such as measles and whooping cough. I would argue that we need better education delivered through the media and or social media regarding vaccinations and their safety to allay fears and risk representation regarding vaccinations. I have some topics on just the tip of the iceberg because there is so much out there regarding vaccinations and anti-vaxxers and the whole thing. To clarify why there are so many unfounded fears about vaccines, why we need better education, how it can be delivered, and finally what impact we could see for the better if we do make these changes. To understand why there is a need for these changes regarding vaccination, it is first important to understand why some people fear them in the first place. A lot of the controversy about vaccinations came from a paper that was written by a doctor called Dr. Andrew Wakefield, and it was published in a medical journal called The Lancet in 1998. He basically wrote a research paper stating that the MMR vaccination caused autism and bowel disease. There, however, were some problems with that paper, and I was able to research the details of it in an article in Medical Daily's website. Eventually, his paper was retracted in 2010 because of scientific limitations, which were not based on statistics. It lacked a control group. It was relying on people's memories for vaccination records. It conveyed conclusions not based on statistical outcomes, and it only used a small sample size of 12 children as test subjects. It's pretty not so great. Additionally, it was later discovered that he had also been paid for his research by lawyers on a lawsuit against vaccine manufacturers that ultimately failed, actually, trying to prove that the vaccines were unsafe. Subsequent researchers spent about 10 years unraveling his research and studied 25,782,500 children and concluded that there was no causal link between vaccines and autism. Eventually, Wakefield actually lost all of his credibility and his license to practice medicine as a result of these actions. Despite all of this, the dramatic tone and attitude of his paper took hold of anti-vaxxers, and vaccination rates, not just with the MMR vaccine, but with all vaccines, hit an all-time low in the U.S. According to the CDC's recommended vaccination schedule, children actually receive the MMR vaccination twice, once at 12 and 15 months of age, and again at 4 to 6 years of age. In 1998, the year that Wakefield's paper was published, the CDC had reported only 100 cases of measles. In 2000, they only reported 37 cases of measles, and again, this is according to the CDC's website. And they then declared measles eradicated in the U.S. However, we were just starting to see the results of parents not vaccinating their children according to schedule at that point. And measles cases began to rise. According again to the CDC, in 2011, we saw 220 cases of measles, and in 2014, 667. Because so many people stopped vaccinating, pertussis or whooping cough has made a comeback as well. And the CDC in 1998 told us 7,405 cases of whooping cough were reported, but in 2015 there were 20,762. That's a pretty big rise. Both measles and whooping cough can and do kill, and both were well on their way to being a part of history. And now there are even vaccinations that would have saved the friend of my life, Taylor, like the meningitis vaccine. According to the WHO, the World Health Organization, one thing that parents also frequently worry about is that vaccines will cause many harmful side effects, illnesses, and even death, not to mention possible long-term effects we don't even know about. The truth is that research has actually shown that the only true side effects of vaccines are localized pain and swelling at the injection site and sometimes a mild fever, and all of that can be handled with some Tylenol. More serious adverse events, and all this is still according to the WHO's website, occur so rarely at the rate of 1 per thousands to 1 per millions of doses that it's hard to even accurately assess. And as for death, statistically it's hard to assess the actual risk because once again, so few deaths can actually plausibly be attributed to vaccines. Also, according to the CDC, the vaccine goes through an extensive 3-phase testing process that can take decades before ever making it to the FDA approval list. The FDA only licenses a vaccine if it's safe and effective and if the benefits of the vaccine outweigh the risks of any side effects. The FDA and CDC together continue to monitor any vaccine added to the vaccination schedule. Now that I've explained just a few of the misconceptions behind vaccine phobias, I think it's obvious we need to do more to educate parents about vaccine safety, but how, and how will doing so benefit children? I had a friend with a baby who thought that she just would not vaccinate her baby Sophia to keep her safe from the vaccination. But then Sophia wasn't protected from whooping cough. And when she went to daycare and the kids at the daycare were exposed, Sophia was the only one who wasn't protected from whooping cough. And she then spent about 2 weeks in the pediatric ICU, hooked up to tubes and wires and at one point a ventilator just to keep her alive. So her mother thought she was protecting her from the vaccination when in reality she almost let her daughter die by not vaccinating her. That's an example of how one child was put at risk from not being vaccinated. But just one unvaccinated child can put hundreds of others at risk. Look what happened at Disneyland in 2014 when there was a measles outbreak that affected 110 California residents. The first unreported case there was an 11-year-old unvaccinated child. The following statistics from the CDC's report of the measles outbreak were pretty startling. Among the 110 California patients, 49, which is 45% of them, were unvaccinated, and 47 of them, which is 43%, had unknown or undocumented vaccination status. 12 of the unvaccinated patients were infants that were too young to be vaccinated, which is pretty scary because they were the most at risk. Among the 37 remaining vaccine-eligible patients, 28 of them, which is 67%, were intentionally unvaccinated because of personal beliefs, and one was on an alternative plan for vaccination. Among the 28 intentionally unvaccinated patients, 18 were children and 10 were adults. That's an example of how easily a disease such as measles can spread, and how vulnerable those such as infants too young to get vaccinated can be. Clearly, it's necessary to educate people, and to some extent we already do that in the media, but it's not enough, and it's not reaching enough parents. Some people skip through TV commercials anyway, and we need to do some reaching out about routine childhood vaccines such as the MMR and DTaP, which is the one that gets pertussis. And those are the very vaccines that became villainized with the Wakefield controversy. Brian Harvey, the Executive Vice President of Scientific and Regulatory Affairs at the Global Liver Institute, quoted in an article on the Scientific American's website, agrees that sound scientific data is key for relaying information and encourages the industry to get creative with education. He is quoted as saying, "We need to fundamentally change the way we share scientific information. Most people aren't looking to scientific journals for information, but to Netflix and Hollywood. It's our job to educate the folks in Hollywood and the television script writers, the Kardashians, and the others who influence our culture with sound scientific evidence so that they can share it accurately. If we had Hollywood do some pro-vaccine advertising, as Mr. Harvey suggests, it could be very influential to parents, as Hollywood has traditionally always been. Also having paid ads, such as apps on Facebook and Pandora, could be very influential." According to another article in the Scientific American, a community in Ashland, Oregon, who also has the distinguished position of having the second highest rate of unvaccinated school-aged children in the country, according to Newsmax.com, is also trying an approach that relies on the internet. Their vaccinations skyrocketed, in 2014. So public health workers and community members built a website known as ashlandchild.org to detail the risks and benefits of vaccines. Previously, the community had used education nights and peer-to-peer education projects for vaccine education. Jim Shames, who is the medical director for Jackson County Health and Human Services in Oregon, had this to say about the program. We were just feeling like we weren't getting much accomplished. Maybe we didn't figure out the right way to break in, but we felt as if our energies would be better served by trying to do this through the internet. In this day and age of technology and social media, we need to find better ways to reach people that they will be more open to. So we've covered some of the ways parents can be educated and why it's so important, but what about the outcome of all of this? Quite simply, if parents are better educated about vaccines, they will be less fearful about them, and vaccination rates will be able to rise again. This approach to increasing vaccinations in the U.S. by targeting education through the media would help us as a nation make great strides to once again eradicating diseases such as measles and pertussis. We did it once in 2000 with measles, and we've been close with pertussis. We can do it again. A global article written by Teresa Majeski for Global Contagion tells us that measles eradication is actually possible because it meets the criteria necessary for eradication. It is easily diagnosed, it has an effective vaccine, and humans are the only host. Additionally, it has been successfully eliminated before. The CDC tells us that the best way to prevent pertussis among babies, children, and teens is through the vaccination with a DTaP vaccine. Starting at the root of the problem, education, is the best way to fix this. Targeting parents in a way that is relevant to them, i.e. social media and media in general, is the way to do it. To sum up briefly, today I have shared with you why we need better education delivered through the media and/or social media to help parents and people specifically better understand vaccines in order to promote nationwide vaccination rates. We've covered the main way vaccine fears came about through controversy stemming from a now retracted research paper written by a doctor whose medical license was consequently revoked, common misconceptions parents have about both and other vaccine injuries, what can happen when children aren't vaccinated, the ways that we can alleviate these issues through better education regarding vaccines through mainstream advertising. I think that it's clear from what we've covered today that in order to once again move towards eradication of life-threatening childhood illnesses, we truly do need better education regarding vaccinations and their safety to allay fears and misrepresentation regarding vaccinations. And I hope that in the future you will all be persuaded to vaccinate your children.
All right, Allison.
I think she had a really good opening showing us the story of Taylor and how it was a personal story connected to her. She had a good roadmap to show us where she was going to go with it, about the fears of getting vaccinated, how we should educate people more, and what are the effects if you don't get vaccinated. It was a good emotional appeal that was very relatable to us when she talked about how it affects the children, the outbreak that happened at Disneyland, and again with her, the person she went to school with, Taylor. I was definitely persuaded by this, and the few negative things that I'm going to say is that she did read her cards a lot, so her eye contact was a little, was kind of not there, and her speech was a little over time, but otherwise she had good citation and is persuasive.
All right. Well, I'll agree a lot with most of the things that you said. I thought that there was a lot of information in the speech. It's very well organized. There's some nice emotional appeals here and there. It is a little full with content, and so it needs some editing. It's not just a little overtime, it's 2.5 minutes overtime. So it's basically 25% on top of what you're supposed to be doing, and that's a little bit of a problem. No, it's a big problem. You've got to be careful about that. The delivery issues, I kind of agree with you on. I thought vocally it's delivered very effectively. Your eye contact, though, suffers a great deal because you are dependent on all of the notes. And what suffers a little bit more are the gestures. Basically, you have your hands up and the notes in your hand, so that's a little distracting. But content-wise, it's well researched. You delivered it nicely. I thought there were very good transitions in the speech, so you did a good job there. Thank you.